that we gather in celebrating today. If you do not know me, I am Nathan Taylor, and pleased to serve as the Executive Director of the Center for Baptist Heritage and Studies, as well as our parent body, the Virginia Baptist Historical Society. And we have gathered an astute panel of people with special insights into a really fascinating topic today that we just couldn't pass up. The reason that we're gathered here today at Culpeper, if you've not already read between the lines, is that, of course, the historic nature of the church and it's celebrating its 250 years, and so many of the imprisoned ministers and other figures that we frequently talk about historically in the 18th century in particular. But there was a fascinating and interesting part of their long history that brought us up into the 1990s that most of us, I believe, in this room could recall. And so before we get into all of that, the center is our educational partner for the Virginia Baptist Historical Society, created in the year 2000, and particularly interfaces, looks for young scholars, particularly in the Baptist tradition. Our signature program is the Heritage Fellows program, in which we seek out promising college, undergraduate, juniors and seniors, juniors and sophomores rather, who travel with us for an academic year and study a program, a project of their choice that they work out with us. And so I don't know, I didn't see Catherine Stork yet, but our student this year is Catherine Stork. She's a junior at William and Mary. I believe she'll be with us later this evening, and her family. And she is working on something so spectacular, I don't want to give away what it is yet. So I'm really, really excited about Catherine. We want to recognize if you are on our board for the Center for Baptist Heritage and Studies, would you just raise your hand? I won't make you stand. And thank you all for all of your input and the many meetings that you put in to make all of this work. And our chair, Ellis West, is here. Where is Ellis? And there's Ellis. And Rick Clore is here. Our vice chair is here. So hello, Rick. So thank you all for being here. Our panelists today come to you with various backgrounds. And of course, I realize I've just left my bios of you in my folder here. But I'm going to I've known you all long enough, I'm going to wing this a little bit. But so Bert and Rose Browning are no strangers to this church. Served here at Culpeper, was it 85 to 95? Yeah. Did I get that right? As senior pastor. And you all happened to be here when something happened in 93 with two Baptists being elected as president and vice president and incoming, and decided to add the church to their route on the Capitol. And so you're going to talk about that here. And Bert is presently teaching at the Baptist House of Studies at Union Seminary. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you teach
Baptist polity.
Polity. That's right. That's right. And no better place than to be with a bunch of Baptist nerds here that we are together. So, also, I will introduce someone who probably needs no introduction to many of you, but my dear friend and former teacher, Brent Walker. The Executive Director Emeritus at Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, BJC as we know it today, in Washington, D.C., and he's been pulled back out of retirement for a current stint as Interim Development Director. Is that right?
Just a spell, not permanent.
That's right.
Back to retirement.
That's right. That's right. So, and we appreciate all the things that you've written in your body of work over the years, Brent. And so it's such a pleasure to have you. And you're going to carry us into the next little chapter of the same chapter because you were involved not only in all of the pieces around RFRA, which we're going to take a break from talking about, but you suggested that we might talk about the so-called Baptist-only prayer meeting that happened at the First Baptist Church of Washington, D.C. shortly after the incoming leaders were here in Culpeper.
2 days.
2 days, that's right. So we're transporting ourselves back to 1993. So glad you all are with us. So Bert, if I could get you, Bert and Rose, to get us started, and I just want to hear your remarks and all your reflections from that day. Tell us what you remember.
I'll tell you what I wrote down. I don't remember everything anymore very well, but I wrote some things down so I wouldn't talk too long, frankly. Thank you, first of all, to Culpeper Baptist Church for hosting this. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to see a lot of familiar faces and be back to a place that we very much have called home, and we still call it home in many, many ways. But we're here to talk about 1993 and what happened with the President-elect Clinton and Vice President-elect Gore coming to Culpeper and how that came to be. And fortunately, Rose, who has a better memory than I do, was reminding me that it was James Dunn who made the first call to me to say that after Clinton and Gore were elected, that they were looking for a Baptist church between Monticello, Charlottesville, and Washington, D.C., where the president and his entourage could worship. They were hoping to retrace the steps of Thomas Jefferson, who traveled from Monticello to D.C. the day or days before his inauguration. This service might very well have happened at Orange Baptist Church, except for the fact that there is no 4-lane road between Monticello and Orange. That would have been closer to Jefferson's actual route that he would have taken coming to D.C. But because of security concerns, and the entourage was traveling on several big buses, they wanted to be on a 4-lane highway as much as possible, so they were coming up Route 29. Well, you can look at the Baptist churches between Charlottesville and Washington, D.C., and the one with the largest sanctuary is here, Culpeper Baptist Church. So apparently, the inauguration committee contacted Dr. Dunn, and the rest is history. They ended up deciding that they would come here. And I remember hearing from the inauguration committee, and their request was the president-elect and vice president-elect and their families and others would like to worship with you on such and such a Sunday in January. Would that be all right? They did not force themselves on us at all. And my response to them was, anyone and everyone is welcome at Culpeper Baptist Church. And of course you're welcome to come. And they said, well, there'll be a few security issues and a few other things. And yes, there were, definitely. Just to keep my part brief here, at least to get the story out, the security detail that came starting about 6 weeks before the actual event, we started getting security clearances and people coming in that we didn't know who they were, wearing very nice suits and ties and things, and looking around the building and asking questions about where does that hallway go and how many windows are there here and all that sort of thing. We knew it was going to be complicated. Now, mind you, they were only in Culpeper for about 3 hours, but they spent 6 weeks getting ready for this 3-hour stint. So you just multiply that times what a president and vice president go through every day of their lives, with advanced teams having to do all that sort of work along the way. We finally decided that the only way to be fair about attendance at the service and to provide some modicum of security was to hand out tickets for the service. The sanctuary at that time, you could pack 1,000 people in it. And so we gave out 1,000 tickets for the service. That way we kind of knew who was getting the tickets. They were offered first of all to the congregation, and then as there were a few left, and then they were offered to other folks. So we handed out 1,000 tickets for the service. The day of the service itself, which was a regular Sunday morning, 11 a.m. worship service, the buses pulled up here, and Rose will talk a little bit about that in a moment. Before that, we had bomb-sniffing dogs going all through the building. We didn't have Sunday school that day. A little bit too much going on around here. Metal detectors at all entrances to the sanctuary. I remember there was a Secret Service sniper stationed up in the bell tower. That's a really interesting sight to look up and see somebody with an automatic rifle sitting up in your bell tower on the day of the service. The press was not allowed in the service. That was really at the request of the Clintons and the Gores. This is pre-computers, pre-cell phones, pre-everything, 1993. The press met in the fellowship hall, which you will see later tonight at dinner. They had banks of telephones set up in the basement, in the fellowship hall. And I think there were 50 or so of them, of members of the press, who covered the service when they weren't taking video and that sort of thing outside. They were there in the fellowship hall filing their stories. Let's see. The outside of the church, we had more people standing outside than there were inside. The service was covered on the outside of the building by C-SPAN. And we still have an old videotape of that C-SPAN coverage. They covered the whole thing from the time they arrived in town until they left. There were loudspeakers set up outside so that people outside could at least hear the service, even though they could not be in the service. And I don't know, I think they estimated somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people were standing outside the building, all on the streets here around the building. My sermon that Sunday was on Daniel in the lion's den, and that's a story in itself. That sermon came to me literally in the middle of the night. I will attribute that to inspiration from the Lord, because I don't know where else it could have come from. But I preached on standing by your convictions. I'm not sure how much good it did, but anyway, that's what I preached on. Fred Anderson supplied the lock and key from the old Culpeper jail, which I used as part of the sermon that day, to talk about the cost of standing up for one's convictions and how you do that no matter what the cost may be. And just a couple of other things, and then I'll quit. Bill Clinton, when he got off the bus here, and I was sent out to say hello to him when he got off the bus, his first words to me were, "I'm sorry to put your church through this." I thought that was very considerate of him, and I said, "You are welcome here, and we're glad you're here. Bless your heart." No, I didn't say that. I did not say that. The only other thing I'll say now, there is a T-shirt back there that somebody in the church presented to me after the service. One of the first things I said when I got up to preach was that having the president-elect and vice president-elect present was such an honor for the church that we were going to put a little label on the pew where they were, that after I had preached to them, the little label on the pew was going to say, "Bill and Al slept here." So that T-shirt is back there with the quote on it. And that's enough for me for now.
Well, I have different memories, of course. I do remember the day Bert came home and said, "He's coming," because we'd had this, not Jesus, that's true. No, and I remember just thinking, wow, that's so amazing. I can't imagine that. I also remember the time leading up, and see, you have to remember, we were young and just kind of, I don't want to say stupid. We were young and naive. That's the word. We were naive, and most people would have gone out and bought a new outfit, when the president's coming, but it never occurred to me to do that. And there's more on that later, but anyway, I just remember thinking, wow, that's really cool. And so I also remember just being amazed that people wanted to talk to Bert and stuff. Like, he got interviewed, was it ABC or somebody came and did an interview with him, and it was on TV. I mean, it made it to the television, and I remember them asking him who he voted for. And he just got a little grin and said, "I'm not telling." And so I
don't tell people who I vote for.
That's right. So he didn't tell, and that was fun. And so my recollection is that it was really last minute that the children and I got included in going out to meet the Clintons. And so even if I'd wanted to buy a new outfit, I didn't have time. And I remember that morning I decided to press my dress, the one and only dress that I thought was suitable for wearing when the president comes, and something happened with the iron and it got this big stain on it. And then I had to go to my second best dress, which was not much to look at. And so any pictures of me are in this dress that I would not have chosen to be seen in. Nor would I have chosen the hairdo that I was wearing at that time. which if you look at the picture, you'll see times have changed since then. But anyway, so that's all been committed to posterity, but that's okay. The next really salient memory I have is just meeting the Clintons and talking like two moms talking to each other to Hillary Clinton. And it really did stay with me. We have a daughter who has curly reddish hair. They, of course, have a daughter who has curly reddish hair. And so Chelsea walked by, and our daughter Ashley was standing there with us. And Hillary looked at Ashley and said, "Oh, I see you have a daughter with red curly hair too." And I said, "Yes, we do." "And how does she like her hair?" "Well, you know how that goes." And we discussed the problems with curly hair and what the kids think of it. And the other thing was, because we didn't know till the last minute that our children were going to be included, they had these really ratty winter coats that, you know, the hand-me-down things when you have three daughters. And I might have gotten them nicer coats had I known that they were going to be standing out there. So I said to Bert, he was going to bring the kids out. Oh, that's right, because I was coming from the choir. And I said, "Bert, under no circumstances are the children to wear their coats outside." Now, you have to know, it was freezing outside. It was January 17th. But they could not wear their coats. And so one of the things she said was, "Oh, aren't your children cold?" And I said, "Oh, no, they're fine. They're used to it." So that stands out because I didn't want them to be seen. And along with that is the thought that it never occurred to us that this whole C-SPAN thing would happen. And our families were all out there in Richmond and everywhere else watching us on C-SPAN. And we had no idea that we were being broadcast, you know, to all these people. And it was just stuff that we would have never thought of, because to us, we just couldn't imagine how special it was. And also, Bert mentioned the buses. This was really cool to me. We did not get to see Tom Brokaw, but he was in one of those buses. And just knowing that Tom Brokaw, who we had all thought was such a wonderful news person, was out there on the bus was a really cool thing for us. And so those are pretty much my memories. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we'll come back with questions, so yeah.
All righty. Well, 2 days and 60 miles later, the Gores and Clintons arrive in the nation's capital, and we were waiting for them. The Baptist Joint Committee conspired with First Baptist D.C. to co-sponsor the prayer meeting pre-inauguration, the day before. And I wish James Dunn, of course, at that point, as well as Everett Goodwin, the senior pastor at First Baptist, were involved in setting that up. And I'm not sure how that happened. I never got the story from James. But we were all set, ready to go. And Bill Clinton loved the idea here. I mean, he wanted to come here to worship, and he wanted to have a prayer meeting with Baptists the night before he gets inaugurated. He didn't want any press there. He didn't want any fanfare. He just wanted a bunch of Baptists to get together and pray for him and Al Gore as they started off as new president and vice president. So that was his proviso. Hillary's proviso was that we finish by 12 o'clock midnight and not go further. I mean, Chelsea was there, and the Gore daughters were there. So you know, it could have gone late. So she said, "Yeah, we'll do it. It's good. It's a great idea, but we got to be done by 12 o'clock, because the next morning at 8 o'clock." They had an ecumenical prayer breakfast, and they wanted to get a little bit of shut-eye in between. So that's what we were dealing with. We split the tickets. We did have tickets, I think about 1,200. That's how many could fit in the First Baptist D.C. sanctuary. We had 600. They had 600. We distributed ours through our member bodies. And Virginia, too. Is anybody here that was at the... Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Very good. Clingenfield. Good. And so we packed in at 10 o'clock was when we started without the first couple and the Gores. The people had stood outside for blocks to get in, those people with tickets. And it was cold here. It was sub-freezing that night, and people were out there shivering and couldn't wait to get in. But they got there early because they wanted to come down front and get good seats, don't you know? But they finally came in at 10 o'clock. We got started without the guests of honor. The choir from Emmanuel Baptist Church, Clinton's church in Little Rock, was there and provided some music. Ken Miedema was there, a singer-songwriter that I'm sure you know. We did some singing and just had a kind of a good time for a while until the two couples and families came in at 11 o'clock sharp. And were in formal attire, of course. They had been to a fancy party ahead of time and came in and sat down front, and we began. The first speaker was former President Jimmy Carter. You know, he had been a member at First Baptist when he was president, and was sort of welcoming everybody to his former church. And he was quite gracious. And there is a tag where Jimmy Carter would sit and family up front. So he said, we came here. We really thought about keeping our membership back in Plains. But then I remembered something that my grandmother told me, that when you move the cook stove, you move your church membership. And I don't think they had to move their stove because the White House is pretty well equipped with it in the kitchen. But notwithstanding that, they still moved their letter to First Baptist, and of course, the rest is history. Jimmy Carter taught Sunday school there every Sunday morning that he was in town. So Carter welcomed everyone. Gardner Taylor, the wonderful African-American preacher, recently then retired from Concord Baptist Church in Brooklyn, gave us a short homily and a prayer. Barbara Jordan was there, former congresswoman and then professor of law at the University of Texas, spoke and prayed in that wonderful voice. That still rings in my ears when I hear recordings of Barbara Jordan. Rex Horn, the pastor at Emmanuel Baptist, the president's home church, was there. Jack Turner at Mount Vernon Baptist Church in Arlington, which was the Gores Church. So they were both there. They both prayed over their parishioners. And then Bill Moyers delivered the main address, much longer than all of the others, but just did a wonderful job, as only Bill can do, both writing it and delivering it. But Ken Miedema, at the conclusion of each of these little pieces, talks, sermons, prayers, made up a song and played it and sang it back to what had just been said. Sometimes he was countering it, sometimes developing it, always a different melody. You remember that? Mike, it was just crazy. Our son is a singer-songwriter, and I know what it takes sometimes to get a song finished and out, and he labors on it a lot. But Miedema was just amazing. So it did lengthen the service a little bit, but it was so cool to hear him do that and to make up the words and make up the melody on the spot was just amazing. Well, the service concluded not at 12 o'clock, but at 1:20. Now, the rest of us could have stayed there all night. You know, it was so magical and momentous. But of course, the Clintons and Gores had other stuff to do very early in the morning, another prayer breakfast or a prayer breakfast. And you know, they were good sports, no recrimination. They were fine, and they left, and you know, it was good. So it was a wonderful occasion. Do I have another 5-10 minutes? I wanted to read you a little bit of Bill Moyer's commentary. I have his speaking manuscript. Actually, we published it in a report from the Capitol. If you want to go look at the whole thing, it's February 1993. But I think with this group, some of his comments are quite apt about Baptist, their relationship to the public square, and some history where we've been. And he said, Baptists hold dear the contention of that early forebear who said that the magistrate is not by virtue of his office to meddle with religion on matters of conscience, to force or compel anyone to do this or that form of religion or doctrine, but to leave religion free to every individual conscience. That conviction is sacred to us. Yet we do not believe that the separation of church and state means the hermetic exclusion of religion from politics. Baptists have much to offer the conversation around democracy, beginning with candor about our own diversity and raucous history. Baptists have been to the left of the American establishment and to the right. Jesse Jackson is a Baptist, so is Jesse Helms. Baptists defended slavery and Baptists agitated to end it. Some black Baptist churches today are precincts of the Democratic Party, while in some white churches, GOP stands for God's own preserve. Some Baptists read the Bible as if it were a AAA roadmap to Armageddon. Others find in it a spiritual code book to the mysteries and miracles of the kingdom within. Millions of Baptists see American culture as part and parcel of the show. Others consider it the enemy. Onlookers shake their heads at how people so disputatious could be defined by a common name. People, those who wear that label, shrug our shoulders at the anomalies and schisms and go on punching, often each other. At the core of our faith is what we call soul competency, the competence of the individual before God. Created with the imprint of divinity from the mixed clay of earth, we are endowed with the capacity to choose, to be, as my brother James Dunn puts it, responsible, response-able, a grown-up before God, making my own case, accounting for my own sins, asking my own questions, and expecting in good faith that when all is said and done, I will get a fair hearing and a just verdict. At last count, there were 27 varieties of Baptists in this country. The brand that appeals to many of us holds that while the Bible is our anchor, it is no icon. That revelation continues. Truth is not frozen in doctrine, but emerges from experience and encounter and continuity. And it is found in the community of faith that includes both saints and sinners. In Jesus, we see the power of the living Word. capital L, capital W, living word. And then he concludes this way. These beliefs do not make for lawless anarchy or the religion of lone rangers, nor do they mean that we can float safely on our little raft of our own faith while the community flounders. Our beliefs form the ground of personhood. They aim for a community with moral integrity, the wholeness that flows from mutual obligation. Our religion is an adventure in freedom within the bounds of accountability. Isn't that wonderful? I love that sentence. Our religion is an adventure in freedom within the bounds of accountability. And then he concludes, Governor Clinton and Senator Gore, it may be that this inbred tendency in free church life is one of the best gifts you will bring to high office in this most pluralistic, fragmented, and perplexed time in our history. Some things have not changed much in 30 years.
Thank you so much, Brent, and thanks to all of you. I was thinking a few moderators' privilege questions that I'm just dying to ask you all. Rose, I'm so struck by your talking about the children and thinking about being a child, but also being a parent now and what that must have been like. How did you prepare the kids for that moment? What was that like?
I can't honestly remember the whole process, but knowing the way I parented, I probably didn't do much. I probably just said, I probably just assumed they would know what to do, and so they just, they were good kids. You all nod your head, right? Yes, they were good kids, and I think they just knew that. Well, I guess we talked about what our job was, and basically our job was just to go out and greet them. And just to smile, and so I think that's pretty much what happened. I don't think Chelsea had a friend with her, as I recall, and she didn't really stop and talk to us, per se. She walked on by, and they just, typical, I don't know how old she was. What was she, about 11 or 12 or something? 12. Yeah, so she probably was, being your typical preteen, just doing her thing. So the girls, we all stood. If you see the picture back there, somebody presented us, somebody took that picture, somebody in the church, and gave us this framed copy. It's us, all of us standing there and talking to President Clinton in that picture, I think. And my recollection is that they just kind of stood there and smiled, and looked friendly. Yeah, I don't know if I'll have to ask, honestly, I should have asked them if they actually had any conversation that they remember. I didn't think to ask. I'll ask them, get back with you on that.
Well, Bert, I have so many questions. But one is my beloved predecessor that so many of you will know, Fred Anderson, did bring the lock and key, which is with us tonight. Will be on the platform tonight, and so we believe it's the first time that it's been back here in Culpeper since 1993. So that's an exciting relic of our Baptist history. But and Fred unfortunately was not able to be with us tonight. But do you remember much about that moment? I've heard a little bit about some of what he shared in presenting the story of the lock and key of the Culpeper jail and the Baptist story of religious liberty, and in the midst of this service that you must have had so many other things going on.
Yeah, I remember some of that. I know that Fred was a little concerned about putting the key and actually trying to get the thing to turn, because it's very old and very rusty, but it makes quite a ferocious, scary sound when it does. And I remember we had some discussion about whether we should actually physically try to turn that key or not. But to be able to hold it up in front of the congregation, not just to the Clintons, but to the Culpeper Baptist Church family and others who were there and would watch later, to say this is what, at least one religious group, this is what it has cost to be Baptist. This is what it has cost to express our faith in the unique Baptist way. And to say we were willing, there were people willing to be jailed for that and to stand for religious freedom. That was a powerful moment. And so that lock and key is far more than a rusty piece of metal. It stands for that kind of commitment to religious freedom for all people and not just for Baptists. So though I don't remember the specifics of exactly what happened in the service, I know we did hold that lock and key up. And in the midst of a sermon about one who paid a price for standing up for his convictions, it was a way to bring it into our own day, from a few thousand years ago to a few hundred years ago to our own day, that it costs something to make sure that all people are free to worship as God leads them and as they feel led to worship God.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Brent, what I'm wondering from you, what do you remember about the Carter's role that day?
Yeah, he was there. I don't think Rosalind was with
okay.
him. He was not on the order of worship. He was not formally a participant, but he was there to to pray. I guess his getting up at the beginning to welcome everyone was sort of impromptu. I think Everett Goodwin, the pastor, probably was looking to have that privilege, but he deferred to President Carter. So yeah, he was just loving the fact that the new president and the new vice president were worshiping in his former church. Yeah.
Excellent. And Bert, we were talking the other day, and I think you might have touched upon it a little bit. You mentioned the phone banks, that the journalists had a phone bank set up in the basement. Was that here, or was that?
Over in the fellowship hall where we'll have dinner. Yeah, it was there.
And
Yeah,
no
just
cell,
different
no
day.
cell phones. It's a different day.
Different day, different way of communicating from what we would see. When you look at the buses in the photographs, I think, wow, they look really old. I'm like, uh-oh. Yeah, it's been 32 years ago. So yeah. I do want to throw one other thing in here, and I don't know if this is one of your questions, but I want to make sure this gets said from me. It was a different day in a good way. This area tends to be a fairly politically conservative area. But as I recall, when the Clintons came to town, there were no Republicans or Democrats. I don't remember any demonstrations. There may have been some demonstrations off in the periphery of the crowd. But that day, everybody was an American, and everybody was respecting the worship that the Carters and Gores had requested that they be able to engage in. People were orderly and respectful, joyous outside, very much so. But there were no politics that day. I did get asked about who I voted for and all that sort of thing. And I remember saying, we didn't invite them here. They came at their request, and we welcomed them. There was no message. We're not trying to portray anything or favor any one party over another or one view of politics over another. It was a different day when people who disagreed could still come together and respectfully engage with one another in a momentous historic moment for this community and for the country every time a president is elected and inaugurated. I miss those days very much, but it was a good day for Culpeper, and Culpeper represented itself very well that day.
Thank you.
There's a T-shirt back there that I have, and I thought that was really fun. Some entrepreneurial person had T-shirts made that said Clinton and Gore and all of that, and I've saved it. Actually, I used to wear it for gardening, and then I stopped. So it's got a few stains on it, but anyway, I'll keep it for as long as I live, I'm sure, because it's a cool memory.
Where did they stay overnight when they were here?
They did not stay here. They arrived, the buses came from Charlottesville. They had breakfast somewhere, I think at Monticello. Came here, arrived just before 11 o'clock, like 10:30, 10:45. Everybody else was in the sanctuary already. They came in, took their seats. We had pews for them near the front. And I think by 12:30, 1 o'clock, they were gone. They got back on the buses and moved on up the road. So they were only here a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours total. And then the parade went on.
Did you have another
No,
thought?
I just wondered, because I'm not sure where they stayed when they got to Washington. Probably the Clintons were in the Blair house. I don't know for sure. But the Gores, of course, had their own house in Arlington, from when he was in the Senate, so I assume they stayed there. Yeah, don't know.
Excellent.
Interesting.
Well, we have a little time do you all have questions? Okay. Yes, we'll go.
How old were your children, and what did they think about all the hoopla?
How old were your children, and what did they think about all the hoopla?
I know, I've got to think about this.
93.
93, okay, hold on.
I know there's
Yes.
3 of them.
Let's see, 81, 91. Okay, so Amanda Ashley would have been 13, is that
Yeah,
right?
12 or 13.
Yeah, 12 or 13, which means Emily must have been like a freshman in high school or so. And then Amanda would have been,
2 years behind.
yeah, so she would have been about 11. So 11, 13, 16, something like that. I really, honestly, hadn't thought about it. I didn't realize they were that old, but they would have been. So, yeah. They
Old
were,
enough to know better.
Yeah, they were old enough to know, how to act and stuff. And they were nice. They they were raised in this wonderful church with 1 million parents. And so they couldn't get away with much because, there was always somebody to make sure they towed the line, although they spoiled them rotten too. But I credit these lovely people from Culpeper Church helping them be the people that they were, because they had some wonderful, wonderful support from this church.
Thank you. There's somebody else.
Nathan, I
Yeah.
might quickly add that our 2 children were in the sanctuary at First Baptist. Ryan, our son, was the same age, give or take a few months, as Chelsea. So I guess he was 12. And Leighton, our daughter, was 9. And I think they had some appreciation for the moment that they were doing something. Doesn't everybody get to do this? Stay up till 1:30 and get home at 3 and have. I think they understood how unique that opportunity was for them, and we've talked about it since then too.
Thank you. I'm just having a good time here. Dennis.
Bert, do you know who made the decision that Culpeper would be the stop and how that came about? It's not like there's any shortage of Baptist churches in this part of the country.
I don't know specifically who made the decision, other than it was the inaugural committee, I think. And I do think they were looking for the largest sanctuary that could manage a crowd and the press in its building without being overwhelmed, between Monticello and D.C. And they didn't want to be all the way in D.C. when that happened, because there are much larger churches up in or plenty of large Baptist sanctuaries up in Northern Virginia. But I think they wanted this to be out in the hinterlands before they got to D.C. and all the stuff that swirls around there. That's the only answer I have. I really don't know.
Yes.
I can help.
All righty.
Did you ever get any feedback from either the Gores or the Clintons on your choice of subject matter, topic of your sermon?
Feedback on the sermon.
I remember Bill Clinton and Al Gore both thanked me, which of course you would expect them to do. But I remember, I believe it was Al Gore who actually said that spoke to me. That spoke to me. And then Bill Clinton was gracious as well. But not a lot of feedback. And I'll just add this here, because might as well go somewhere with it. I had people in the church, some of you sitting here were probably some who said it, who said, oh, Bert, you know, they're going to call you after that sermon. They're going to want you to be part of the administration. They're going to want you in DC. We are going to lose you to the Clinton administration. And I remember I said to them, as soon as the bus leaves town, they won't even remember they were here. And that's an exaggeration because they're much more gracious and appreciative than that. But it was my way of saying to the congregation, you know what? It's a big world, and we're little fish in a very big pond, and we had our moment, we had our 15 minutes of fame, and they move on. There's other things going on. 6 months later, I just found it in the album back there. 6 months later, I got asked by one of the local newspapers here if I had heard anything from the Clinton and Gore folks, and 6 months later, I had not heard a thing. Not a thing. So about a year into the Clinton-Gore administration, I got a letter from the inauguration committee. It was addressed to the Reverend Hubert, my name is Herbert, Hubert O. Browing. Thank you, Reverend Browing. And it was a very nice paragraph of appreciation for the day. So I made sure that plenty of the people in the church saw that. And I said, this is no commentary on Clinton and Gore. I said, it's a big world. They've been busy. There's a lot else going on. And I got a thank you note. So you're welcome.
And I might add that we got thank you notes from Bill Clinton. I assume Everett did on the First Baptist side, but not just James Dunn, but me, a junior staffer then, and other staffers. He was able to write notes to. I'm sure somebody else typed it up. It was signed, and that's so typically Clinton. You know, he's so good at following up and expressing some gratitude for what people do with him and for him. Yeah.
Excellent. Are there others? Betty?
Bert, do you still have a copy of your sermon?
Do you still have a copy of your sermon?
The original copy of my sermon is at the Virginia Baptist Historical Society because Fred Anderson asked me for it. So I think he actually has my original, and I have kept a photocopy for me. It's handwritten on, I used notebook paper, always just used regular school line notebook paper. Hand wrote 4 to 5 pages, was about a 20-minute sermon. And that's what that is. And as far as I know, unless they've used it for Tinder or kindling or something, it should still be in Richmond, at the University of Richmond, at the Historical Society.
Indeed. There was somebody else over here. Yeah.
Yes, I can shout too.
No.
But,
I'll repeat the question for the televised audience.
Okay, very well. You've touched on this, talking about 6 months and a year out. But I'm really wondering practically, after a spectacular once-in-a-century event like that, how do you manage getting back to normal? Or was there an ongoing, lingering effect? As pastor, your first thought had to be, how do I talk this next Sunday? So what was it like to manage that? And what happened and how long did it take?
What was the lingering effect in managing going forward? Yes.
There are 2 thoughts there. First of all, that particular Sunday that Clinton and Gore were here, we did not make budget. I don't know if any of you who are members of the church remember that, but we came up short on budget. That was one tight group that showed up. That 1,000 people never opened their wallets very, very wide. I would say, quite honestly, by the next Sunday, we were back to normal. Frankly, it was a relief because we had been so consumed with security issues and all this ticket dispensing and all of this. I mean, this is still a small town. I mean, this is, and this was a big deal coming to a small town that had no experience doing that kind of thing, any more than I did. And by the next Sunday, we were kind of back to, whew. We did not have 1,000 people the next Sunday. I don't think we had 500 the next Sunday.
I just thought of one thing that was kind of cool. One of the FBI agents who did the what do you call it? Yeah, the pre-stuff, whatever. Well, you can tell him, because well, anyway, they kind of connected with each other. They really, obviously, respected one another. And we moved away from here, really a couple years after this, back to Richmond, back to home. And when we live in Brandermill there, and that FBI agent lives in Brandermill. And we were walking down the path one day, and there he was. And of course, they recognized each other, and that was a really cool connection. It was a number of years later that happened.
There are some very, very fine people who serve in security, very dedicated, and that was a good man, a good man.
Others? Yeah. Brent?
I'm sure there's a bulletin somewhere. Do we remember what hymns were sung? And did they sing?
Do we remember what hymns were sung?
I just remember that our minister of music sang a solo, and we were talking about it. I'm remembering that he sang, "The Lord is my light and my salvation." Does anybody else remember that? Yeah, and I know we sang some really good hymns. I know they were picked with an intent. And there might be a bulletin in the
There's probably a bulletin back
in
there.
the scrapbook back there, but I don't remember them. But I know they were really good ones that had a message.
Brent may remember what was sung at your service.
I don't. I wish I had recordings of all the Ken Medema responses, but it was wondering. But apropos of that question in a little bit different context, when we were members at Columbia, or still are, but even back then when Nancy was on staff, the Clintons came to worship the Sunday morning before his second inauguration. His Rex Horn, his pastor from Emmanuel in Little Rock, was preaching, and so that's why they came. But talking about Clinton can belt it out. I mean, he loves to sing, and he just at the top of his voice, and I don't know how good it is, but it's loud.
They knew the hymns. I remember talking about that earlier.
Yeah, they did. They sang lustily that day. I mean, they really did. They very much, you could tell they were at home in a Baptist church. They knew the Baptist hymns, although I don't remember which ones we sang. I hope there's a bulletin in there. That'll tell you how much we go back and review this stuff. I'm sure it's in that album somewhere, but we haven't looked at it in a very long time.
Others. These are wonderful questions. Any others? How many of you were here that day? So lots of memories here. Somebody had a hand up towards the front.
I did. I just
Yes,
have
ma'am.
a memory.
A
My memory from that day is, Bert, you stood up and looked at the president-elect, vice president-elect, and said, "I just can't wait to see what this congregation's going to do for me for my birthday."
That's great.
Of course, was not here. I was living in Texas at the time, but we watched it on C-SPAN. We did. Church and watched it on C-SPAN.
The Schwalls watched it on C-SPAN. Excellent.
I will say one other thing. That Sunday became so ridiculous. You know, we were already having the president, vice president. Governor Wilder came, Senator Robb, Fred Anderson, and then all these Baptist dignitaries, you know, were coming, and all these other political people. And I remember going home and just saying, this is ridiculous. I said, I'm not even nervous about it anymore because it's ridiculous. You know, this is just all these people are coming. And I said, you know, we're going to have service and I'm going to preach, and it's ridiculous.
And we were just these little no-name people, so having Fred Anderson was almost as good as having the president.
And he had to think through, there was a little procedure with making sure to get the lock and key through security.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, we had to alert security to make sure that he could get through with this thing. Because imagine trying to explain to White House security or FBI this lock and key, like, oh yeah, right. Sure, that's from Culpeper Jail.
Giant metal
Yeah.
object, yeah.
You'll have to ask Fred about the specifics, but
Yeah,
he had to have like pre-clearance for that.
Right. Any others? This has been a marvelous conversation. Well, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity if you want to pull one of our panelists aside and share another memory and talk through it. You can have the opportunity to do that. We look forward to dinner together. But thank you all so much for being here. And we look forward to the rest of our evening together. So thank you.
Oh, Nathan, I'm sorry, let me say just one other thing. You do want to see the Heritage Room here. The history of this church, Roger Clatterbuck, there's two of them in this church. That's the other Roger Clatterbuck, has worked on this. It's just through these doors and to the right. It is a testament to 250 years of history of this congregation. You do not want to miss that. We have the albums and things from the Clinton and Gore stuff back there, but you do want to see the Heritage Room. This church really appreciates its history and has preserved it well. And Roger, thank you to you. Excuse me.
And happy birthday to John Leland today.
That's right. There will be a cake. So we're going to wish John Leland happy birthday at dinner with a proper cake from a historic bakery here in Culpeper. And the Heritage Room, I believe, is right across from where we're eating as well. So perfect segue.
Should have had a big wheel of cheese.
That's right. Well, next time. That's the next birthday. Thank you all so much.